Leadership is heavy at times, but it's also a privilege. What do you say about privilege?
Privilege is a pressure.
Privilege is a
Pressure is
pressure.
a privilege.
Yeah, that's what it is. Pressure is a privilege, is not a pressure.
I got it backwards there for a second.
But remember, how you respond today to that pressure shapes not only your future, but the people you lead and frankly defines your character.
Welcome back to the Get Lit podcast, hosted by your Leadership Ignition team. I'm Shane Beckham.
And I'm Mike Hough. Every week, we light the fire of leadership by sharing real stories, hard-earned lessons, and practical tools you can use to lead with clarity and impact.
So today we're diving into a topic that every leader, whether you're running a Fortune 500 company or a local bakery, will face at some point. And that's called leading in difficult times. And Lord knows we're in some of those now. So these are the moments that are going to test you, stretch you, and ultimately shape the type of leader you want to become. So what we're going to do today, Mike, is we're going to set some real world examples. You know, I'm going to speak a few things about the gym and some other things. And then I know, Mike, you're going to talk to us about rebuilding an airline ground handling business after the pandemic, you know, where you had to navigate cash flow crunches to managing conflicts at an executive level. I'm going to bring some of the lessons that I have in that I learned firsthand, you know, coming out of the pandemic and then going into the gym, you know, for leading people through hard seasons in real life is just as real. Just the scale is just a little bit different.
Yeah, so let's get right into it, Shane. I mean, leading in difficult times, it's not easy, but it is a proving ground for great leadership.
So we want to set the context, but basically what we're going to do here, Mike, is what difficult times really mean, you know, to us, okay? What do they mean to us? And they can mean a lot to the same other people that may just not say it out loud. So it's a broad term. So there's difficult times and there's challenging times. And there are some correlations between the two, but at the same time, they're both in two different meanings. So let's talk a little bit about the difficult times, Mike. Maybe, you know, you talk about it from the aspect of owning a gym. You know, obviously there's a difficult time is when summers hit. People are not they're not coming to the gym as much to get signed up. You know why? Because the new year's not starting. It's not new year, new me. You have all the vacations, you have all the things. So from a difficult time, from a financial aspect, a gym owner has to be prepared for that slump season. And what I've learned, unfortunately, Mike, there's multiple slump seasons that come with owning a gym. It's not just the summertime. In fact, I'll be so much to say is everybody thinks January is the best month to be in business. I will dare to say it's the worst. People wait because they think they can do it on their own for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and they realize what? They can't. So that's when they have to come somewhere instead of just doing in the beginning. So, you know, the difficult times, that's just one example of a difficult time in business, but financially it can be something that you better be prepared for because it's going to be an economic downturn. Same thing goes for everything that we deal with now. Go out to eat, go to the grocery store, go to all these other things that are currently happening in our economy. Although some of them's getting better, it's still an expensive world to live in. And Mike, like you and I have talked before, people still treat their health as a luxury. They do. It's oftentimes the last thing on the list. So when the cost of a good goes up or the cost of a child's tuition or school goes up, what do you think suffers? It's these things over here that we call luxuries, which unfortunately is gym memberships. You know what? I love how I feel. I love this, but I just can't do this anymore. Well, you probably can, but that's a whole nother topic. Point being, the economic downturn in any type of brick and mortar business the type that I run can be very deadly, and you must be prepared to handle it. Take that a step further, Mike. You've got additional things that can define the difficult and or challenging times within a business. Is there a crisis inside or outside of the gym? What happens if, again, talk about COVID, you know, it was a crisis in our country. It shut everything down. And I can tell you with assurance, I'm very thankful to God that I was not in business owning a gym during that time in my life. I know several great individuals that did not survive that. You know, when you shut something down, it completely severs their entire way of living. So that is what I would say is a crisis. And then you have the internal conflicts. I tell this people all the time, we have set the stage in our facility is we want to be a community. We want to be a family because as you well know, it takes one person, one client, one coach, one person can be that negative energy and it can start shifting, Mike, shifting, shifting, shifting. Well, that can create a very difficult situation inside of your gym because now the attitude that was once positive can start trending to be negative, and then you got more people joining up on the wrong side of the fence. Last one is a big one. And as owners or as high level executives, this one is trouble to talk about, Mike, and that's just personal struggles. We are the ones that are supposed to be, we are Samson and we're holding those pillars up, right? And if we're not holding those pillars up, who else is going to hold them up? Well, when those personal struggles keep, it's like having, bricks that somebody keeps adding on your shoulders while you're trying to hold these pillars up. And it's like, how much can you hold before you start to lose? The personal struggles are what you have to keep inside and find trusted people to be able to communicate those two effectively and manage them, Mike, because if they go unmanaged, eventually the whole building's going to fall down on top of you and failure is immediately going to follow. So those are some of the times that you have to be able to lead through the difficulty, economic downturn, crisis inside or outside your building. Hell, we had a tornado miss us by zero point 0.9 miles. Talk about crisis. What if that had hit my building? You think about things like that, internal conflicts, coaches fighting amongst each other, clients not getting along with each other, personal struggles. When you lay awake in bed at night, how am I going to pull this off? All these things are going on in my world. So, Mike, it's a challenging way to live life, but you have to learn, you have to be taught, and then you have to have the God-given ability and the wherewithal to take and absorb what you've been taught and lead through that. Going back to the buffalo, you push through that storm because once you're through it, you're on the other side of it. So what's your thoughts on that, Mike?
I totally agree, and I think the biggest thing that you talked about that's really important for us to understand is we all have difficulties in our day to day jobs, whether you're a leader or not. But if you're a leader in particular, there's difficulties, there's struggles every day. That's what leadership is. If there weren't struggles, there wouldn't there wouldn't be a reason to need a leader, right? But difficulty is when there's outside influences, other things other than running the day-to-day business that are impacting and making it really challenging to run. And I think what you illustrated as a gym owner is not any different than an executive of a Fortune 500 company, as you said in your opening. There's different scales, but the leadership principles are absolutely universal. I just think that as we go through today's discussion, and we share, what my experiences are and your experiences are, you're not going to see significant differences in what we deal with, and you're not going to see significant differences in how to respond. So we hope that that's educational for our listeners.
Right. So, Mike, let's talk a little bit further about your situation. I'm curious, and I know the listeners love to listen to you segue into what you do and how you've done this. But one thing that when you and I have talked, I found to be remarkable is when we talk about COVID specifically in the airline industry and how that affected that. I mean, it's still, I'm sure, splintered in some ways because of that, like most of other things are. But, this was very tricky business for you. And, it's mind-boggling to me to know how much theme and energy you guys had. And all of a sudden it's like you didn't get your feet chopped off. You got your whole damn legs chopped off from underneath you. And it's like when the smoke clears, right, I can see you sitting in the office or at home going, there's only one option here, and it's forward. It's forward. So let's talk a little bit about rebuilding the business that you work in after the pandemic.
Yeah, and thanks for asking, because it's a story that's I won't say it was fun to live through, but it's fun to tell. And the lessons learned that I learned as a leader, but first time CEO, and having to deal with that was invaluable. It's going to shape decisions I make for the rest of my life. So the story goes, it's March of 2020, and we have started our new phase of life beginning back in 2017. I joined in May of 2017, and the mission is rebuild the organization, create a new story, grow like crazy, make sure we're rated number one or number two across all of our customer base. Our customers are airlines, so not easy to do because as you can imagine, flights and flight schedules and demands and customer demands are changing all the time. And what we do as a ground handling company is we act as the representative of the airline, whether that be in services like ticket counter or gate agent activities, or the guys you see out on the ramp that are marshaling the aircraft, loading the luggage, etc., cabin cleaning, helping people who've got mobility needs throughout the airports with wheelchair service, et cetera. So all those cargo, airline catering. So we do a whole broad range of services. So you can imagine that we're growing at 30% clip every year. I mean, compound annual growth rate of 30%, which tech companies have a hard time doing that, and we're doing it in a contracted ground handling people space. And so it's a rocket ship. And we think we're private equity owned. We think we're going to go into late 2020, and we've done everything we need to do. And it'll be time for us to recapitalize with a larger scale financial sponsor. March rolls around, pandemic hits. I still remember where I was when the news hit me. I was in Seattle flying back from a conference with an airline. And I looked at the TV and I said, oh no, we're in big trouble. And so got back that day. We formed a war room at the corporate headquarters building. And we lived in that war room with the executive team for probably 3 or 4 days, planning out what are we going to do? Because exactly what you said was the case, Shane. It was, oh no, what are we going to do? Because everything that we've just done, all the things that we built, we got to throw it all away. We got to start over. We were about 4,600 team members at that point around the US and Canada. Also, not a great time to buy a Canadian ground handling company. We were US only until the fall of 2019. So just a few months prior, we bought a Canadian ground handling company and catering company, which has been brilliant. As a result of that, we are regrowing like crazy now. But Canada was in much worse shape than we were from a lockdown perspective than the US was. Inter Canada flying came to almost zero. Canada US flying was zero. There was still a lot of US to US flying, but it was dramatically lower than what it was pre pandemic. So we started seeing flight volumes coming in, flights shutting down. Initially, no flight. And then, the flying, the airlines started to really think about, okay, well, who's flying and where are these routes we're going to operate? And we went from several $100 million of revenue down to $40 million of revenue over a 2 week span. We've got 4,500 team members. We've got this whole organization that we've built to be ready to be, $500 million in revenue ultimately. And we had to dismantle it in order to stay alive. That was the only answer. We had to dismantle it so we could rebuild it. And so, we ended up laying off all but 1,700 team members within, a 24-hour period. It was awful, affecting all those families and all those people, because where are they going to go find jobs now? No one's hiring. We've got this pandemic. We're getting locked in. And then there's other things that happen that you can't even imagine, right? So as a private equity owned business, we have access to a credit facility with a lending institution that gives us money to borrow to go buy capital expenditure items like ground support equipment, the things you see outside. But it also gives us a revolver because we get paid by our customers 30 or 45 or 60 days excuse me, after we finish services for a month. So you got to pay your folks for that month, and then you got to still fund the cash for another 60 or some number of days thereafter. And so we borrow from that credit facility to pay our employees. And then when we get paid, we pay the credit facility back sometimes when we get low on cash flow. And that happens in valley periods, right? Well, our lending institution said, this airline business is in big trouble. We're shutting off access to all capital. So now not only do we have a problem with no revenue, now we have a problem with no capital. So how in the world are we going to fund even the base operations that we have going on? We had to figure it out. And so that's what we did in the war room, Shane. We figured it out. There's a lot that goes into how we did that, but we did it with always an attention around our core values, which thank God we built those before the pandemic. They led us through it, frankly, which was one, we're not going to jeopardize safety. That's our first core value. We will not take down anything in the arms of safety. Two, we're going to care about our employees. So no matter what decisions we have to make here, we're going to do it with the most care and the most thought. We're going to communicate effectively. We're going to be honest. We're going to be direct and make sure that we handle ourselves as we should. Three is we're still going to deliver performance. Our third core value is performance excellence. We are not going to make reductions to staffing that affect our ability to deliver the performance on the flights that we still had to handle. And fourth was be successful. And be successful means make money and grow. Well, that one had to take a side job for a minute and get parked for a couple of months till we could figure out how just to operate. Now, luckily, we were able to, as part of the airline funding bill, carve out a small piece for ground handlers to get access to cash that allowed us to be able to continue to operate. But without that, we probably would not have been successful ultimately. Good news: the tail end of that story is here we are a couple of years later, and we've grown from that 40 million to just over 330 million in revenue this year. So we were able to rebuild the whole thing after dismantling it. So, just the, the uncertainty for the entire team, the weight of those decisions on the entire team. My first time at the leadership seat, and having to figure out how to navigate all this. I mean, it was an unbelievable story to tell it now, and at the time, it felt like the world was falling apart. We just had to figure out how to get through it all. Shane, your thoughts? Any questions on that?
Yeah. So, so you get back, you get in the war room, you got a whiteboard,
Yep.
flip chart, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, I just wanted to bring up some points you got, never did I hear the word you panic. Nobody panicked, which
It,
I know panic,
it would have
was,
killed
it
us.
was,
You can't panic.
it was, listen, there's no way we can change this outcome. It is what it is. This is the cards that we've been dealt. So how do we move forward and how do we rebuild? These are the tangible items that we know to be true. These are the resources we have available to us. All right. What's the first thing we do? What's the second thing we do? What's the third thing to do? You start locking in those top three priorities, and you have to do what? Here's what I want to bring up. You have to make very, very hard decisions that don't just affect the bottom line, it affects people. And I know how hard that is. And you're talking about now from the position you were in, it's easy to talk about now, but when you're saying I went from 4,600 people to 1,700 people in a matter of 24 to 36 hours, the impact that has on you and your leadership team is one of those personal struggles that nobody sees. It affects you. You may not know all 4,600 people, but you're responsible for all 4,600 people.
And their families and their kids and
A-
yes, yes.
And, that is a heavy load, but, to your credit and to your leadership's team credit, you guys were unwilling to try to hang on to something and I'm not saying that the people decision, but you didn't allow yourself to let emotions control your decisions.
Yeah,
That's the point I want to make.
yeah, and you gotta. I mean, look, it's one of those things where you have two choices: keep doing what you're doing, don't lay anyone off. We all took pay cuts, by the way. With the leadership team volunteered pay cuts immediately to make sure that we could impact as few people as possible. Volunteered them. I didn't ask them to. The team came together and said, "What do we want to do?" First thing somebody said is, "Well, we all have to take pay cuts." Yeah, absolutely. There was not a question in the room at all. But then, so now the next decision is well, we're not going to have the revenue to pay all the folks that we have employed. So what are we going to do? You've got one or two choices. You go into bankruptcy and you just keep paying people until you're gone. You're gone. We had no idea. Was this a 2-week problem or was this a 6-month problem? We hoped it was a 2-week problem. We did not know it was going to be a 3-year problem, basically. And so, thank God we made that decision because we would have gone bankrupt. The company would not exist today. And so you're trying to make decisions that are in the best interest for everybody. And what's in the best interest for everybody is that we survive as a company because at least those 1,700 team members would still be employed tomorrow. And maybe in 2 weeks or 3 months or whatever, we'll get everyone back. The good news is we did. Well, everyone who wanted to come back, not everybody came back because they found other jobs, thank God. But we got everyone who wanted to come back, which, we did not know that was going to be the outcome. But if you're playing game theory, it was a pretty good bet to make.
Now, I think that's, beyond impressive, Mike, that you guys were able to do that and listen to how you came through the smoke, man. Instead of pushing the brake pedal when that smoke came, you put it to the floor and you drove through the smoke, not knowing what was going to be on the other side.
Yeah.
And that's what the definition of leading through a very difficult time looks like. You made clear, concise decisions, not based on emotional decisions. And I've seen that happen a lot. And that's why I bring it up. All those years throughout my paving career, very rarely did I have a leader that would be willing to take the emotional aspect out of a decision. Well, if I give you this, I'm going to hurt this person's feelings, even though you're the most qualified.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
worst kind of it's the worst. I mean, you want to lose your most qualified people. That's how you do it.
I
That
own a gym now, Mike. Did I
yeah,
mention that?
yeah. I thought there might be some correlation there. Hey,
All right.
and just one more piece on this that I think is important is, the other thing that was really really hard is when you don't have access to capital and airlines start flying again, and you got to figure out how you're going to bring everybody back. And not only airlines didn't just come back to the same places they were with the same flight volume they have, they changed their model because the business travelers that were traveling pre-pandemic did not come back. Remember, everyone still worked from home for a long time. The people that came back were all these folks who are working from home that are working while they're taking vacations. They're flying all over the place as leisure travelers. So airlines had to figure out a whole new market scheme, a whole new route structure, a whole new everything, which means they were not just bringing their volumes back to the places they previously were. So now we have to bid on new contracts, new markets to grow the business back because it wasn't coming back to the markets we were already in. All sounds good, except I need capital. I need to be able to pay to move GSC or buy new ground support equipment or have startup costs or, and in order to grow back to the even 80% level where we were was going to cost us a ton of cash. But we didn't have access to cash. So that was the next piece is okay, we got to figure out how we're going to navigate this environment. And truth be told, there was only one way to do it, which was figure out who you absolutely have to pay today. I remember doing this as a young man, newly married young man with 3 kids and no money. Who am I paying today? Who am I going to wait until they scream and then I'll pay them? And then I got to, and we shuffled for a long time. We communicated. We told our vendors, look, here's where we are. Here's what we're doing, and we'll pay you, but it's going to take us some time because we're trying to rebuild, and it's good for all of us. Some didn't like it; they screamed, and so we paid them. But a lot of folks got it, and we worked with our vendors to make that happen. That was the next phase of a real challenge for us.
I can only imagine. I know when you have to not only realign your entire business model with personnel, then it becomes a next. It's now we got to redefine our logistics of our
Yep.
business model. You
Yeah.
basically started another company from scratch and kept the name.
We sure did. And one other very important part is the I believe what saved us, what allowed us, because we came out super strong. We were, in my opinion, and some of our customers have told us, we were the best at rebuilding compared to our peers, and meaning in terms of quality, in terms of responsiveness, and what we were able to do that others couldn't. And I believe that firmly that that's because of the culture that we created going into the pandemic. We didn't know it was coming, right? We built an organization of people and leaders who really wanted to be there and who loved the brand. And when you do that, man, you build a team of people who will do anything to make sure that it survives. And I think that's really what drove our positive outcome.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of good nuggets to take away from that, Mike, is just leading through difficult times. But if you're prepared for the difficult times, even the unknown ones, and it's not that you are being prepared for this on purpose. However, the way that you and your people operate the business line prepares you for things like this because you've built the bedrock is there. The foundation of the business is there. So no matter how hard the ground quakes, your foundation truly didn't fall down. You might have lost part of the roof, maybe the second floor, but the foundation in the first floor remained intact because that is where you are solid in your leadership team. And you and I talk a lot about that. It makes a lot of difference. You got to have people that GWC stuff gets
Yep,
it, wants it, and has the capacity to do it. And if they don't, that you got to get them off the team. It doesn't matter if you have one employee or 4,600 employees. It's still the same mantra because those are your leaders. You said it before. Every person on that works for you is a leader in some capacity.
that's right.
From the person that's in the grocery store bagging your items to the person that's over the entire country. Everyone is a leader to some degree. You have to be able to teach them how to lead through the difficult times. And clearly, you did an amazing job through that. So I love to hear that story. It was fantastic how you were able to resurrect the Titanic, my friend.
Well, and as most folks know, we are currently in the process of now marketing the organization to larger financial or strategic sponsor because we've rebuilt and we're ready to get in the market now. And so I'm super excited about whatever happens next because that will be for the entire team. That will be the certification that we did it right. And so
Awesome.
looking forward to that. But hey, man, yeah, I know you've been through plenty of these struggles too, real serious difficulties in business. We've heard a little bit about the gym, and I think that's probably what your take is next. But tell us, man, tell us about the difficulties you've had and how you've navigated them.
Well, little known fact. I don't know if I've shared this in some of my personal stories or not, but I'm not abashed or ashamed to tell it. I've always been to where I've tried to get to certain levels in life, and it's you get close, and it's like you said, then something will happen, and you get your feet knocked out from under you, or you take a bigger piece of the pie, maybe a little bigger than you should have. But there's a time in my life back in 2007. Um, Personal story, but that's okay to share. I'd gone through a divorce and or was in the middle of it. I can't remember the exact time frame. Forgive me. But anyways, I fell on very hard financial times. So much so, Mike, that I basically lost everything that I owned. I had to file bankruptcy. Just some dark times in my life, and I can remember getting a rental house finally when I scraped together enough change, and I'm sitting there in this rental house, and I've got a milk crate. I've got one of those like Academy fold out chairs, okay, in my living room. I'm sitting there. I've got a milk crate. I have my laptop open up, and that's my TV. You go in the kitchen, you open it up. I've got one pan and one lid and like three spoons and
That's all
two
you need.
towels. And I'm like,
You're a rich man.
I got all I need, right? So my point to all of that is this. No matter what happens to me in this world, in this life, I've already licked the bottom of the damn barrel. I know what it tastes like. I have lost everything that I've owned. Everything. I've tasted it. Two things happen when you taste that. One, you never want it to happen again, but two, you're not scared of it. Why? Because you can rebuild anything you want to rebuild if you have the right mindset. So he's talking about the gym, there's a lot of things that I loved about the asphalt world, a lot of things I didn't. It was a grind, and unless you made it into an exact spot in leadership, you were screwed, dude. You missed out in hundreds of thousands of bonus. Like it was just one step. And whatever the reason was, I got to the damn step right before it every effing time, man. And I just couldn't break through. Well, it was either you don't have a degree or you've not been here long enough or you don't have the right last name. And I'm like, whatever. So point being is I had this gumption to do something different, meaning I wanted to start something, but I knew there was going to be a challenge in doing that. So what I didn't know, Mike, was the difficulties that would come from bad decision making and lack of preparedness. And when I say lack of preparedness, I want to say I'm a very prepared individual. But when I went to launch this business, I truly wasn't. I didn't ask the right questions. I thought I was prepared, but I was prepared in the wrong areas. So all these years of leadership that I had under my belt, going way back, the Marine Corps, firemen, heavy presence in the paving world, I was leading, but it was a different type of leadership. And I wasn't prepared to lead through a difficult time like I was fixing to face, and I didn't know it was coming. We've talked a lot about this, and I don't want to be a dead horse. So when we launched the business, we were set to open in January. I quit my job in October. It means I made the decision to sever all cash flow coming into my bank. And none was coming in, and a lot was going out. And I leveraged some cash to get started and was loose with it, didn't do enough planning. Regardless, when I say we opened in January of 2024, and I made a lot of mistakes on the front end that I didn't know I was making. And like I said, when the smoke settled, I ended up with 12 people as members in my gym. 12. 12 times 35. That was the amount of revenue I was bringing in per week. $35. Because that was our foundational rate. Mike, when I opened the doors to my gym, I had $3,000 left in the bank.
Wow.
That's it. $3,000, 12 people, $7,000 a month lease,
On 2 grand of revenue.
$5,000 a month construction loan, and
Yikes.
everything that goes along with it. So you can imagine the look on my face. We're not even 30 days open yet. And I'm like, well, this was fun.
Yeah,
you
man.
know, this was a hell of a ride. I made it a full 30 days. Can you imagine the thought process that was going through my mind at this point? What a failure I am. I'll never get past this. Nobody will ever be able to look past how badly I have just failed. And I just remember thinking, I am not going to die on this vine. I am not going to die on this vine. I'm going to find a way, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but by God, I know how to lead. And now is the only way. I'm thinking back to what you said, I didn't have a leadership team. I was the leadership team. It was me. So I remember sitting, at this point, I'm working every shift. I'm there at 4:30 in the morning. I don't leave till 8:30 at night. So there's not a lot of time. And I remember in those breaks between classes, I'm sitting there and I'm like, what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? Well, the only way to do it is just, you start doubling down. Okay, how am I going to get more referrals? How can I do a referral program for the 12 people I got in the gym? Because that can double to 24. One of the books I've read that says for every person you can touch, they know 100 more people. You got to take the blinders off. I got to see big pictures. Well, still didn't know what I was doing, but we started picking up a little momentum. Then by God's grace, sorry for the other person, gym shut down in my area. Bam. They reached out to me. I jumped on board. We put signs up. You are welcome to come in this gym. I will extend the foundational rate. Come see me. And I held a big meeting and we were able to convert a bunch of those people into members. And, the smoke was still in the room, and it still is, Mike. I mean, it has been a battle. We're pushing up on 2 years now, and it's just a tough business to be in, man. It is a tough business to be in because that is the first thing when there's economic pressure on someone. I'm telling you, man, the first thing they're going to drop is a gym. The first thing people want to do when they go on a 1-week vacation to Florida. Hey, Shane, I need to pause my gym membership. I'm not going to be able to use it. And, I'm like, are you pausing your Netflix, your electric bill, your water bill, every other bill associated in your life that you're walking away from for a week? Are you pausing all of those? I'm telling you, Mike, the amount of the people view this type of world that I live in is amazing to me. And just I'm done. See you later. I'm like, well, that's not quite how this works. We have policies. So you want me to pay for something I'm no longer going to use? Read any other contract that you sign. It's there so we don't go out of business tomorrow if something happens. It's this is not frustration. It's amazement to me. I tell people this all the time. But here's where I'm headed with this. You have to understand how to effectively lead through this because your team members can get frustrated and pissed off. And you're like, listen, at the end of the day, we are here for a reason. And that is to change people's lives. That is why we got into this business. I can assure you with 100% positivity, it's not to get rich because we are not going to be. But when you sit in a room and you see people with tears coming down their cheeks and you've changed something about them and, that you and your team were part of them changing their entire lives. Or you sit in a room and you ask these questions, where are you now? What is your why and where do you want to be? And they tell you, they unload. Like, well, here's how you get here. This is how you get here because Mike, you and I know both fitness is the gateway. It's still my opinion, regardless of whether I own a gym or not. It's the gyms, the right ones, the good ones, because there's good and bad ones. The good ones, you shouldn't be able to walk through the door. It's so busy because it should be a priority in human beings' lives, but it's not, and that's okay. But my point is there was a lot of pressure in that beginning. Okay, how are we going to figure this out? How are we going to make these decisions? Well, I put my head down and all I did was work and grind and push and dig and come up with solutions. And the second thing, Mike, is I finally started getting people in that I'd hired that were GWC people. They got it, they wanted it, and they had the capacity to do it. And that's when I understood we have a nucleus here of a fantastic team that wants to help other human beings. Now let's grow. Now let's scale. Now let's push to the next level. Now let's make sure that we're all on the same level. Because the second problem when you run a gym, Mike, is everybody still wants it to be the magic pill. You know, they want to come in and then 6 weeks later they want to be either lost all this weight, and it just doesn't still work that way. There's so many other variable pieces to the puzzle, and getting everybody to understand how that works and how to be bought into yourself. It's just a challenge every single day because there's so much frustration that you can find. But what you have to find, Mike, is the empathy. You have to understand the root of the problem. You have to balance the compassion with your standards because it's easy to lower your standards to help somebody out, to not be honest with them. We were talking about this before we started shooting. It's not that I don't care about you. I care about you too much to lie to you. And if you don't do this, you're going to get worse. Your health is going to deteriorate. It's not me trying to get your money. I'm trying to be honest with you about what's going to happen. He'll have to be a doctor to understand that, right? And it's also getting the right team amongst you to help you get up that mountain, meaning I will lead from the front, and everybody that works for me knows I'm in the trenches. I'm right there beside you, and it's doing that hard work and not passing it off, not pushing the buck like you did when you rebuilt. You know, you got in front of it. I had to do the same thing. Let's get in front of this. Well, now it's more of a team driven thing, but it's leading from the front, being that leader to lead through those difficult times. We have months to where we have anomalies, where we have a massive rush of cancellations, and it's just like, but the next month it's law of averages. We see an uptick. It's finding a way to lead through that to where panic does not set in. And lastly, it's picking culture over comfort. You know, building the right community to me is more meaningful than collecting blind membership dues. That said, I will effectively turn someone down if they're a bad fit for my gym. And rarely is that anybody does that anymore. We want to build a family and a community to where there's no pressure, there's no intimidation, to where you feel like you belong the second you walk through that door until the time you walk out it. Because those places are hard to find anymore, Mike. That's taken what I talked about in the podcast last week. That's taken logic out, because logic tells me to take every human that wants to pay me. The magic says, make this a place that nobody will forget. Be the 30 minutes of their day that is the best 30 minutes outside their family. 2% is all we need to give. And that's in having a team that buys into that, Mike, and has to give that energy every single day. It's tough. But those are some examples that, that I personally took away to lead through those dark and difficult times. And we're still right there in them. We're still fighting that fight every day, but we're getting closer. Every day we get a little bit better. And it's just like I tell my clients, I preach what I try to do, not try to preach what I do. Every day I wake up, is this gym better than it was the day before? Answer is yes, because we've gotten better at our craft. We've gotten better at helping people, leading from the front, providing that empathy, Mike.
Shane, can't even say it. It's an incredible story. I've heard a million times. I've heard, different pieces of it at times, and I've heard, different segments and different challenges that you faced. And, one of the things that's incredible to me is what I think. I've only been in your gym one time, and no one else was there but you, Adam, and I. But what I see online is a constant stream of positivity from your clients, from your coaches. And so what I wonder, what I hope you can share with us is, how do you do that? You got serious issues, man. You got serious cash flow, well, other than mentally, you got serious cash flow issues, and the weight on you. I mean, this is your entire ability to survive, and also a little bit on your entire ability to validate your capabilities, right? How are you keeping that from your clients and your coaches?
That's a good question. First part of first part of your question, leads me to say, hey, when we have people that are brand new that come in, and I've got some new ways that I do things, and I try to have a sit down meeting with them at some point in around week 3 of them being there, and just have like a client game plan meeting so I can learn more about their goals. And one of the first things they tell me is, you have something special here that's just different. I never have experienced this before, and I'm a gym person, and I can't really effectively explain, but that's so meaningful to me because that's what we want to create, and that's what the team wants to create. The team, the positive culture is infectious. It's like we talked about before. The dominoes are going to fall. Let's make them fall positively. Let's highlight the positive things, not the negative things. And I think that's why, you shield some of this is a business owner. The team knows to a degree when there's certain things that I've given them enough because I'm very transparent with my team. And I tell them, I'm going to share things with you that most owners won't. You know why? Because I trust you and I want you to know where we are so you can effectively help me. Because if I'm hiding all these things, they can't. So when we talk about some financial things and, the reality of the gym world is it's like, my lease payment goes up year over year, but we keep the membership rates flat. You know why? Because everybody quit. People don't take account into any of that. The cost of running the operation and the business continually goes up. I gave my coaches raises, membership rates stay flat. Like we don't. So you're continually eroding any type of revenue for the gym because it's just the way the gym world is. I know that. I'm not complaining about it. It's just tough. So when you talk about these cash flow problems, it's tremendous because the gym is infant. And when you're infant, you can't just go anywhere and say, hey, I'm having a bit of a rough patch. I need 50 grand to carry me. I need a bridge. Bridge loans. I need a bridge. And you can easily get past it and pay the bridge off. I don't have the ability to get a bridge because I've not been open long enough. I can't show the proper financials to be able to get the money. So it's literally you get people in your gym or you drown. And then once you get them in, you've got to shut the back door, meaning that means you've got to create. This is how I do it with the clients and the coaches. If you don't shut and lock the back door, meaning that once you get someone in, you make them want to stay. So lock the back door so they don't want to leave. Then you're continuously bringing in more people. But what I've found recently, Mike, is the second part of this is now I'm entering into a stage to where now I feel like some of them are, well, he's too busy. All this rush of new people, all these new people in the way. And I'm like, what? That it's just everything that you do compounds and creates another issue, right? And you have to learn how to lead through that. And, that's just part of how we've wanted to create that and how it's shielded is, the gym's surviving. It's just a tough market to be in constantly. And it's like we just said, if times get really tough, it's very hard. You mentioned it before. You didn't have capital. You didn't have the resources that you once had. Well, as well as I do, if you had been able to get your hands on the capital, which you did a little bit, you can get the return on it, but you have to survive until you have it. And I think to me, this is what I've learned about the world of entrepreneurs. It's it it's why so many people don't survive. They just don't make it because there's no bridge. There's no way to get the little bit of money that you need to survive at certain times of your business. And if you're not properly funded or prepared for that, then you're in big trouble. But hopefully that answered your question. I get a little long winded.
No, it completely does. There's a couple of parallels in there with things that we deal with all the time. You were talking about it, the scenario of team knowing everything. We're very open with our team. I don't know many companies. We started this intent to go to market 2 years ago. The second we decided that was the direction we were going to go, I told everybody, all the way down to our general manager level. Below that, folks won't really understand it. Sometimes when I go to station visits and I sit down with the frontline team members, I absolutely share information with them and tell them about it. Because there, I have the opportunity to explain what that really means. And so it doesn't really work in a town hall because there's not enough time to get into the detail of what it means to them. But we did whole town halls with our GMs and open item discussions so that everyone understood it. And I don't know any other company that does that. A lot of folks just show up one day and they've got a new ownership team, and definitely didn't want to have that happen. So sharing in that information with them allowed them to understand some of the decisions we would make in the short run that we wouldn't make if they're all long run decisions, right? So when you're going into market, you don't make major investments in certain areas that normally you would have if you were in a regular run environment. So anyway, I just found that interesting. That doesn't matter the size of the business we talked about before. There are these parallels. It just makes sense no matter what kind of organization you're in. But I want sometimes it breaks down, and things that can break down are what you alluded to before. You alluded to a bad apple, and bad apple's bad, man. It just rots the whole bushel, as we know. But even when you have good apples, but they no longer want get along, they no longer want to stay in the same basket, right? That's hard. I've got a scenario where I've had two senior executives, both of which I think are outstanding leaders, great contributors. They're amazing people to be around. They over a specific issue, they don't see eye to eye, and the issue is very important to the organization. Very, very important. And it's really about how we move forward and the level of effort we put into this project that we're working on, which is important. I mean, it's critically important we get it done. I think they both agree that that's the case. The problem is that the department that's supporting the other department, the leader of that department feels like the department who's being supported just isn't giving it the effort that they need to give it. And that leader's becoming frustrated and sharing with me their frustration, not really sharing with the other person so much directly their frustration, which is a problem. A leader needs to be able to have, the ability to have direct one-on-one dialogue with their peers. And I think at times probably cascading down within his team the way he feels, which is then doing what with his team? It's making them feel the same way, right? On the other side of the coin, that leader feels like he's got way too much going on in his department. There's too many things to tackle. There's no way to get the level of effort on this thing that's so important to the other side of the organization. Uh, Understands how critically important it is working on it in phases, but doesn't have the time to give it that the other leader would like for his team to give it. And so, I just called them together and I said, guys, you're starting to break apart the fabric of the organization. Everyone knows you two are at odds about this, and your entire team's a no, and they're adopting your attitudes about it. That's totally unacceptable. I hired you two to be leaders, to be executives, to build the culture of the organization. The culture of our organization does not deal in drama. It certainly doesn't deal in personal attacks. Not that I've heard them actually make personal attacks, but I just want to make it clear. Uh, it deals in getting the job done, figuring it out. So get in a dang room and figure out what can be done, and get your it's really a matter of expectations. This guy wants this to be done in this time period. This guy says only this much can be done in this time period. I don't think they've ever had that conversation. Both of them didn't like the discussion. Both of them felt I was being too hard on them. And I just said exactly what you said, not in the same words, but what you said is exactly right. I care about you too much not to be direct and honest with you. Because if you keep going down this path, either of you can't have you in the role. It's just not going to work. And that's not what I want. So I have to be direct and honest with them because I want them to stay in those roles. And I definitely want to get this project done. So anyway, just the situation that I've gone through. How about you? How have you dealt with some of the issues between team members?
Yeah, we recently had some things come up at the gym, and so what I do, Mike, and I know you do a lot of this too. My team is smaller, so obviously it's where I go in and I have one-on-one meetings with each coach once a month, right? We're going to have that personal one-on-one time, even though I may be with you coaching or doing something else. No, this is in the office, one-on-one by ourselves. And the first question I ask is, how can I help you? What can I do better to help you? And, sometimes you're so involved in growing and leading the business that you miss a few things. And some situations can be blatantly obvious like you were dealing with there. Some of them can be a lot more hidden. And then all of a sudden I sat down with all these coaches individually, and I came home and I sat there and I was in my upstairs office, which I am now, and it's quiet up here when there's no children here. It's just me up here by myself, and I'm tucked in a little corner. And I remember sitting there and I'm just talking out loud to myself, which I do a lot. And I'm like, I've got a big problem. I didn't know this was going on. Like this nucleus that I thought was so tight knit has become splintered. And I'm like, what the hell happened? And then I regrouped, doubled down, and had additional meetings with each employee. And I told them all, I said, look, this sweater, the story of the sweater, it's unraveling. And if we don't cut the thread, it's going to unravel all the way to the top. And I said, I wanted to get down deeper in the weeds, collect the data, as you say, and then make a rationalized decision as a team. And it was just little stuff. But little stuff, what? It compounds. The he said, she said crap, by the time it gets to the she, is done been twisted 3 or 4 times. The truth and reality of what was said is taken out of context. And it's just, it all boils back down to, how hard am I pushing this team? Am I causing this? Am I being a bad leader and not giving proper direction on who's doing what? You know what the problem was, Mike? This guy. You know why? Because I had let something happen and I didn't define what someone's position was. And in that simple act, it created this whirlwind of shit from top to bottom. And it got not bad, but it got bad enough. And so what we do? You and I are big believers in traction. I decided to have a modified L10 because I said we're having an emergency L10 this Friday. And unlike most L10s, we've got one problem we're going to discuss and solve. One problem is all we're going to talk about because it is the biggest problem we have currently at our gym, and it was about us. And we were able to talk through things and work through things. And I was able to give clarity and give others the opportunity to speak, to provide clarity on this. And, it's the little things like that. And I thought, what if I hadn't had that one-on-one meeting time? How bad
That's the
would I
question I
have
was
been
just going to
walking into
ask
a
you.
gym by myself?
Yeah, that's the question I was just going to ask you. And so speak on that a minute, right? It's uncomfortable. It's difficult. Young leaders, inexperienced leaders in particular, do this all the time. You just kind of bury your head in the sand and hope it goes away. You hope they work it out. They work it out. But you and I know we've been around long enough. That's not the direction it goes. So talk more about that.
I say this all the time. You may not like the answer that I give you, but I'm going to give you the answer that I feel is best for the situation. One, because I know probably both sides of the puzzle. You don't. You probably know your side. You probably think you know what the other side is, but there's a good chance you're wrong about what that other side is. And I'm not saying that my opinions or my wisdom is greater than anybody's, but when you give me both pieces and you give me time to digest it, I'm going to look at it from that 30,000 foot approach, like we talked about last week or a week or two before. I'm going to give it to you and just simply cut through it. I'm going to say, okay, this is what's good for all of us as a team. I hear what you're saying. I'm not discounting it. Give me a solution right now that you would provide me. Give me one of your solutions on how to fix this. And if they start the solution with a bunch of eyes and then like, time out, this isn't about you. This is about the team because nobody cares about individual problems. Guess what? We all have them. If you have an individual problem, that's me and you talking because a lot of it was just one of the rules that we have, Mike, is if the coach is not in the room with you, don't talk about them. I don't think it can get any more clear than that.
I think it's a great rule. You
If they're
know,
not in the room with you, don't talk about them, myself included, because I can be guilty of that. I can say, well, you know what that other coach did the other day?
yep.
I try to use it as an example.
Well, the best part of rules are for everyone to hold everyone accountable. And if you started doing it, my hope is you've got the trust of your team enough for them to say to you, knock it off. And
And
that's what
that's
you want.
and I tell them that all the time. Like, well, I didn't, I hear that a lot. Well, I didn't want to say anything to you. Say it to me.
Yep.
Call me out. If I'm not doing something I said I was going to do, remind me, ask me, get on to me. I want you to do that. So yes, you made a good point about young leaders, and it's exactly right. The problem's not going to go away. It's going to manifest. It's going to continue to get worse until eventually you're staring at a problem that you've got to probably let someone go or someone walks away. And now you've got gaps and voids you have to fill because you didn't act. You didn't lead through the difficulties, Mike, because those one-on-one conversations are not easy. They're difficult conversations to have.
Yeah,
And
and important point here. I filed one-on-ones with my team too, and in an example that I shared with you for the last couple of weeks, the reason I know we've got this problem is because of my one-on-ones. They're telling me both sides are telling me about this problem, and my, I mean, it doesn't matter whether or not you're a young coach or you're a seasoned executive. You take the path of least resistance. Your team was telling you instead of telling each other. My team was telling me instead of telling each other. And at the executive level, that's just totally unacceptable. We're paying you a lot of money to be a lead, to be an executive leader. You have a conflict with somebody. Productive conflict is fantastic. Get in a room, have a
yep,
conversation, figure it out. You don't need me. I, you and I don't need to be judge and jury for our team. You have to be. You're getting both sides of that story, and they weren't willing to talk. We shouldn't ever be in that position if we build the right culture. Which means, obviously, I'm not there yet. It's aspirational for my team too,
yeah.
but it is something that we're striving to do is make sure that folks are just willing to have that productive conflict.
Nah, I love that point because that's what I said. I'm like, if you come to me and this is, then I will give you the decision whether you like it or not. If you're willing to say, I'm like, 'cause that was the same question I asked. Well, have you said something to your teammate? That's the other rule we have. As soon as you walk off the floor after a session, the expectation is it's not always followed. The expectation is, how could I help you better as a mic coach? And it should be reciprocated. How could I help you better as the floor coach? And if you're asking the questions and giving open and honest feedback, most of this crap goes away. Because I'll even say, like, I think I catch them off guard because I always have something usually to say. It's not negative. I'll say, when did you start doing this? Like during demo, you were way over here trying to get all the attention on you when you're supposed to be right on my hip because I'm your demonstrator. You're giving the audience two targets. You're confusing. When did you start doing that? Well, I don't know. Well, let's not do that no more. Well, how can I help you? Well, it seemed like your energy was low. I get that line. I'm tired, but you're right. I have to leave that at home. So that's another way we combat that.
Yeah, I love it, man. Look, I think we've given some really good examples this week on what it means to have difficulty and how to lead through it. But maybe let's just do some takeaways. Your first thoughts?
Mike, one of the key words that you hear me and yourself talk about a lot is clarity. Again, most every topic that we talk about will tie back to that. And clarity, and by simple definition, is just you just cut through the noise. If you're clear on what your expectation is, then your team should have very clear expectations on how to do their job. And if there's division there, I'm going to steal the next one. Then that's probably there's a communication problem. If you don't have clarity, then I think you need to take a step back, and then which is exactly the exact scenario I just gave you. The team wasn't clear because I had not properly communicated on who the leadership team was. That's easy fix. But you know what? That can easily turn into a massive problem. So my thing to you, Mike, is find clarity, and it doesn't matter if you have to over communicate it. You got a couple?
Yeah, I do, and I think a couple things that make a lot of sense is so get clarity, make sure you communicate overtly, over, specifically during a crisis. That's when people need to hear you the most, as you just said. But then you got to stay consistent. You talked about us as executive leaders needing to be the folks that hold the pillars together. They need to see you doing that. They need to see Atlas steady and strong. Specifically in times of crisis, they need to see you not panic. Because if you're panicked, what are they going to do? They're going 10, 15. So you just can't do it. And then, the point that I made before is connection. Because we invested in relationships before the pandemic, we were able to negotiate the pandemic together as a team. If we hadn't done that, it would have been very difficult. So, and also during the pandemic, and we're trying to do all this stuff, everyone's working a bazillion hours. And so you got to check in. How you doing? Are you getting enough rest? Are you eating well? Right? You got to care about your people and create connection. Thoughts on those?
So last point to that, Mike, is, and I've had a situation occur recently to where I had an off week, 10 days. I was off. There's a million different reasons, and I could give you an excuses, but I won't. It was just the past week and a half has just been some trying times for me personally. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I went to the team and I was very transparent. I was very communication and consistent in connection with them and told them I'm sorry. I know that I've been off. I know that I've not been the best leader these past 7 or 10 days. I recognize it, but I'm asking you as my team, two things. I said, number one, amazing job that you do, that people are coming to this gym because of you, not me. But two, if you see me to the point to where you feel like I'm not giving you what you need as your leader, I need you to come in and say, "Hey, you're what's going on?" And I apologize to the team, Mike, because I think that's part of what you're saying. They have to see this, but even if they see one arm starting to do this, I think it's okay for you to tell them that I'm not perfect. I'm gonna have some stumbles. I'm gonna have some falls, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna push them back out. And I'm going to do that by leading from the front with you right by my side. So don't panic. Everybody's going to have an off week, and even leaders can, I think, be vulnerable at times, at the right times, as I guess is my point to that. It wasn't during a crisis. It wasn't during something that I needed to be on the front lines. It was a time to where, you know what, I just had a bad week. I wasn't the best leader this week, but I want you guys to know that I will be back, and I am back, and we're moving the ship forward. But thank you for rolling it forward while I had a little bit of a broke arm, whatever you want to say there. So, not every, I guess that doesn't make me a better leader, but I've learned over the years that I have a lot more respect for a leader that will be honest with me if they're having a hard time with something than one that'll hold it in and take it out on me in different ways.
Well,
That's all.
so we gave you 4 C's. If you didn't pay attention, that's what it was. 4 C's: clarity, communication, consistency, and
Yes, it
connection.
was.
But that apply perfectly in a difficult time. But they apply perfectly all the time, along with the 5th one you just gave us, which is contrition. As a leader, if you do something wrong, admit it. It's amazing the number of times that we'll have a complaint from a frontline team member bubble up to my email, ultimately send me an email because they're so frustrated with what's happened to them all along the way as they've tried to deal with some kind of problem, a payroll issue, a scheduling issue, a uniform, stuff that should just be handled, right? And 9 times out of 10, it gets to me because somebody along the way didn't want to admit they made a mistake. It's like, man, just you screwed up. It's cool. Fix it, right? Help people. And I have a personal affinity to our frontline people because that's where I started. I started in the ramp many years ago, and I remember not being able to pay the bills, and the littlest gap on a payroll problem would create a great havoc at home. So,
Sure.
anyway, clarity, communication, consistency, connection, and contrition. I love adding that one.
Yeah.
So, any action steps this week you can think of?
Mike, I think just to me again, something that I have really started doing a lot more of myself personally is taking, some of the things that we've talked about before and that after action reports and or just the clarity exercises that you and I have defined before is just get the white piece of paper out or get your journal out and say, okay, what are 2 or 3 things that I can get clear on this week in my leadership ability through the difficult times? I think you could take all the C's if you wanted to and write 1 or 2 different things beside that, Mike, because if you're a leader, like I said, and everybody's a leader at some division, some point, it's how am I leading through the difficult times? How am I being the person that everyone needs to see? And I think that you can write those things down that where you're strongest at and where you're weakest at. And then you can circle the ones that you're weak at and start figuring out a problematic approach to solve some of those things. So to me, it's just getting clear with how you want to move forward. Last thought on that, Mike, is when I do the client game plan, it's specific. I leave them alone in a room for 5 minutes to fill out the packet. Uninterrupted, the door's shut, and I come back in. You know why that is? Because every human being, when they're tasked with having to write down difficult things in silence, your subconscious mind will give you the answer if you'll listen to it. And once you write it on that paper, it becomes tangible and it becomes real. If you just sit and think about it, it'll bounce around a little while, then you'll think about what's for supper. If you write it on paper and you put that post-it note on your computer and say, this week, I'm going to work on clarity in this regard, you will work on clarity in that regard. And I think that's some of the misses that people have, Mike, is they think about shit. They listen to these podcasts and they get in the mood. They get that dopamine hit. Then they hit the next podcast or the next station and it's gone. Take time to write it down.
Yeah, and for our listeners that don't speak Southern, supper's dinner. I just thought I'd translate that. Uh, yeah. And then, one action step that I'd give is you may not be in a difficult season right now with your team, with your business, with your whatever, but you're going to have them. It's guaranteed it's coming. We don't know when, we don't know what type, we don't know what it's going to be. And so my action step is evaluate your connection now. Evaluate how tight your team is now. And if it's not as tight as it needs to be, it's not as tight as Shane's team is to navigate their cash flow situation, not as tight as my team was to navigate the pandemic. Take that time that Shane's talking about and write out a plan. Figure out what you're going to do to improve that connection so you are prepared as you go into the fire.
Mike, I agree with that. That's some great points on action steps. What do you say we wrap this up a little bit, talk a little bit about what this episode means to each one of us, and then we'll close the saying, difficult times, they don't define you, they refine you. The stories that we've shared today are proof that leadership isn't about avoiding the storm. You're not going to. It's about guiding people through them with courage, clarity, conviction, plus the other C's we just talked about. It's like we talked about before a million times, Mike. The storms are going to come. You're going to have valleys. You're going to have mountaintops. It's how you choose to approach and get through each one. And the leadership through each one of those storms are what pulls you and your team and all of your people that are around you through that storm together. So that's kind of the point for me. How about yourself?
Yeah. And Shane, if like we talked about, listener, if you're not in a difficult season right now, if you're in one right now, remember you're not alone. Leadership is heavy at times, but it's also a privilege. What do you say about privilege?
Privilege is a pressure.
Privilege is a
Pressure is a
pressure.
privilege.
Yeah, that's what it is. Pressure is privilege is not a pressure.
I got it backwards there for a second.
But remember, how you respond today to that pressure shapes not only your future, but the people you lead and frankly defines your character.
Mike, I agree with your point there, and I've loved doing this episode with you, brother. We've rambled on long enough, so thanks for listening to the Get Lit podcast with the Leadership Ignition team. If this episode has added any value to you, share it with another leader who needs encouragement. This is how you get better with leadership, as you listen to real-life examples, and we hope we provided some of that to you today. As always, you can find past episodes on leadershipignitionteam.com or wherever you get your podcast. Mike, let's close her out, my friend.
Yeah,
and
buddy.
As we say, as always,
let's get
lit.
See y'all.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Ignition Team podcast. Go to our website at www.leadershipignitionteam.com to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, engage with us, and find your favorite podcast networks, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.